Have you ever wondered what it's like to work in law enforcement? Here on Behind the Star, we share stories about the Orange County Sheriff's Office, Central Florida's largest law enforcement agency. From forensics to dispatch to the deputies on patrol, we'll talk to the brave men and women who protect our community. This is Behind the Star, the official podcast of the Orange County Sheriff's Office. Welcome to Behind the Star, the official podcast of the Orange County Sheriff's Office. My name is Jon Busdeker, your host here at Behind the Star. And do me a favor, you can listen to the podcast, but before you get too far, follow us on Facebook and Twitter and Instagram. We put up all kinds of great content on there. If you're not following us, please do. In fact, there's actually a video that went up recently that has to do with where we are today. It's about one of our 911 call takers, an emergency communication specialist. Her name's Monica. Actually has 1.5 million views on Facebook, and so I'm pretty proud of that. So if you haven't watched that one, go check that one out. But I sort of spilled the beans there a little bit. I'm actually at the OCSO Communications Center, which is kind of in a secret location. We don't like to tell everybody where it is, but I'm out here. It's on the east side of the county, but that's pretty vague enough. But I'm here with Nikayla, Phillip. She's a dispatcher, and Nancy Grassi. She's an emergency communications specialist, and we're talking about communications today. Welcome to Behind the Star.
Thank you for having us.
All right, I'm going to start with Nancy because that's kind of how the calls come in first. So before we get too far, Nancy, maybe just talk a little bit about the Communication Center. You know, maybe how many people work here roughly, and
we have approximately 120 people here.
Okay, 120 people. And so, like I said, we're kind of out on the east side of the county, but how does it work? A 911 call comes in and it comes to people that are in this building?
It comes to people in this building. We have call takers, so it comes to us first. We take the information. We enter it into what we call CAD system, which is computer-aided dispatch.
That's correct.
And then it gets to dispatch, which in turn gets dispatched to the deputies on the road.
Okay, and so we're going to break this down a little bit. And so Nancy, when a call comes in, there's a huge floor of phones and computers. And so I call 911. And what happens? Like, how does the call go to a certain person? Is it random? Do the people pick? And Nikayla, you can jump in too, because I'm sure you've done this job as well. Like, how does it work?
So it's a lot of things that you never realize actually play into how things work. So it uses like your cell phone towers, and it triangulates to see what the closest agency is to you. And then once it finds the closest agency, then it goes through the phone lines, and it's random who you get as a responder, a 911 operator that gets it. And we don't know who you are until we hear the greeting that says 911, what's the location of your emergency?
Well, why is that, Nancy? Why is that the first question?
Well, if you don't know where you're at, and we don't know where you're at, we don't know where to send help.
And so, and I'm sure you get this a lot where people call and they're like, well, I think I know where I am, or I think I know
Yes.
the address. Like, how does that work? So if you're like, I'm in Orlando, I think I'm in Orange County. Plus, we have a lot of tourists here. Mm-hmm. They might say, I'm in Orange County, but maybe they are, maybe they aren't. Like, how does that, how do you even know where to send people?
One of the frequent things we get is, I'm not from here. I don't know where I'm at. So, I guess for Nancy,
if they have a phase 2 phone, which I don't understand the technology of a phone being phase 2, that can get us fairly close, and we have our mapping programs, but it's not exact, especially if you're in an apartment complex. We're not going to know what apartment number you're in.
Okay.
That's why it's very important to know your actual address and the name of the apartment complex or the business.
Okay. And I would hope you can kind of start sending people maybe right away if it's an emergency.
Right.
Yeah.
And maybe as time can go on, you can sort of get it out of them. Okay, what are the major roads? Are you at Goldenrod? Are you at Colonial? Like, at least we can get you to the near part of the county.
Correct.
Yeah.
And so that's the first question, what's your emergency? And then I assume normally people sort of speak up and they start explaining it and sort of talk about this, where I'm sure some people call 911 where it's not an emergency, but some people call 911 and it is an emergency.
Yes.
So who makes that determination that, okay, this is something that we need to send deputies to, or this is something that, we need to send deputies, but maybe they don't need to turn their sirens on?
Well, we have our policy and procedures, which has also been put into our call processing guide. In becoming a call taker, you learn what questions to ask so you can determine what type of call, how to process it, the priority.
Mm-hmm.
So what are some of the calls that are maybe the emergency calls?
So typically with like emergency calls, the ones that deputies are going lights and sirens to, those are normally like code 3 calls. And so it's like a crime that happened 15 minutes or less. There's certain calls that fit under that umbrella. So like a shooting that happened like just now, or someone's breaking into my house right now. So one of those kinds of things.
Okay, so if it's a true emergency,
Yeah.
that's when you start sort of saying, okay, we'll get somebody there. Hopefully we know their address,
Right.
where to go. And then is there like a next level? Like, okay, it's important. We're not going to ignore it.
Yeah.
We don't ignore anything, but we're not going to ignore it. But, maybe we don't need to rush there right away.
Like somebody broke into my car overnight, or my spouse mate hit me 2 days ago.
Yeah.
I mean, it's important, but it's not going to be a lights and sirens situation.
Yeah. My neighbors are arguing amongst themselves loudly outside. No one's hitting one another, but they are arguing. It is heated. Like they're probably on the verge of fighting. They're not fighting just yet, but that would be something that a deputy would go to.
Okay.
And next priority. Yeah.
So when that call comes in, either one of you, but Nancy, if this is your job, and Nikayla, I'm sure it was your job at one point too, you sort of have to make that initial determination, like, okay, this is an emergency. We need to send people there.
Mm-hmm.
All right.
Yes.
I don't know if a lot of people sort of realize that.
Yeah.
I mean, somewhere that call has to come in first, and somebody has to make that decision. Okay,
Yeah.
this is important enough to send our deputies, as you said, lights and sirens, which is like the emergency.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. All right. So then next, if somebody's on the phone, I assume, do you try to keep them on the line until the deputies get there, or how does that work?
If it's a code 3 situation, we try to get suspect information. If are there any weapons, if there are weapons involved, where's the suspect, where's the weapon?
Yeah.
Any injuries, depending on what type of call it is.
Yeah.
And
Because
keep them talking.
at the end of the day, we're not there with the situation. So they literally have to tell us and not take us to the situation with them, but they have to tell us and be our eyes and ears so that we can transcribe exactly what they're saying and how that situation is playing out.
And talk about that a little bit, the transcribing part, because as they're talking, whether they're talking in a normal voice or they're yelling or shouting or frantic, which I understand if it's an emergency, you're taking down notes for what reason? Is it because the deputy's on the way?
Then they're driving. When it's an in-progress call, I'll put a send it. I'll keep sending it, and then the dispatcher reads it to the deputy while they're driving.
Okay, so talk about that. So Nancy, if a call comes into you, they're saying, somebody on the other line says, there's a shooting in progress, people are firing guns, you're taking notes, but then Nikayla, you may be the one that's actually telling the deputy what's happening. Sort of talk about that sort of that exchange of information. Like, how does that work?
So dispatchers are basically like a median of information. So we rely heavily on the call takers to obtain the information and to control the caller to get enough information, while the deputies rely on me to relay that information to them in a timely manner so that they can coordinate their response.
Go ahead.
Oh, no.
So what are you telling them? So if Nancy's writing down these notes, there's a shooting in progress and neighbor says this or a caller says this.
Yeah.
Like, what are you telling the deputy?
So initially I tell the deputy the address and like the cross streets of whatever happens. And I tell them like the basic summary of what's going on. So if it is a fight happening, like an active physical fight, I'm telling them, like, if the call taker got how many people were fighting, I tell them that's how many people are fighting. If someone has a weapon, then I want to know the person that has the weapon, what they look like, so that when the deputies go there, that they're aware of the exact person that has the weapon or the type of weapon that was mentioned. And so we relay updates based off of what the call taker gives us.
So when you're talking to the deputy like that, are you talking to that deputy, or are you talking to anybody who's on the way? And like, how does that work?
Well, the way that it works is when a emergency call comes out and we dispatch that call to them, Initially, it could be one deputy that's responding. It could be two deputies that are responding. But overall, everyone is hearing that same call. And based off of the call, the road supervisor or whoever's in charge is going to arrange how many units they need to go. So if they need more response, they're going to say, hey, we need more units to go to this call. So everyone that's going to it is the ones getting the information. And if a supervisor is not going, they're hearing the information to coordinate a response.
And so, Nancy, as you're taking notes and telling maybe Nikayla what's happening, I assume things change sometimes over the course of, when the person made the phone call to by the time the deputies get there. So you just have to like keep updating.
I keep sending it. I keep asking questions. I will even re-enter information I previously sent because there are times, Nikki, she may be monitoring 5 or 6 send progresses.
Yeah.
And so she can't always keep rereading through the call. So I'll figure, okay, I've got the initial information. I'm going to just keep sending it. If maybe the suspect left another back, I'm going to put that back in the call too.
So when you're typing this, are you just typing like on a regular keyboard and it's going into a system, or is it like a shorthand version, or are you just typing like anybody else?
We have approved abbreviations, signals, 10 codes that we enter. But yeah, it's a regular keyboard.
Okay. All right. So Nikayla, she called you Nikki, which is probably how you go, but I'll call you Nikayla though, because we just met. But so I didn't even think about that. So you're juggling maybe 3, 4, 5 different calls at a time?
Yep. Yes, we are. We work multiple calls because we're a big county, so things happen. And when things happen, it doesn't just happen in an isolated incident. We work multiple things. So I could be working one big call and another big call happens, and then a deputy is on something that I didn't think was going to be big, and it turns into something else. So our attention is split between multiple things.
Wow.
And then there's those other units that ask us to do things for them. So we complete tasks for them too.
And you mentioned it being the county. So the county, we have our own sort of system, and then the city has their own system. Is that how that works? City of Orlando?
Yes, they do. They have their own, what it's called, we call it CAD system. It stands for computer aided dispatch. So they have their own system in which they process calls also.
What about the other cities in Orange County? So somewhere like Winter Park or Maitland or Eatonville, are they all separate too, or do they get folded into the Orange County?
They have their own. So we're called PSAPs, right? Primary answering points, basically. And so certain jurisdictions, they contract together. So Apopka, they dispatch for Eatonville Police Department. They dispatch for Maitland and themselves too.
Do the calls come here, or do they go to their own?
So sometimes we get each other's overflow. So if they are tied up with calls, those 911 calls don't just disappear. Somebody has to answer them. So they'll overflow to another agency. Typically, it's us.
I think when I was here last, which has been several years, but I think the woman I spoke with, Cynthia, she said that we get something like 1 million calls a year, 1.5 million. It's a lot of calls.
Yeah, we process a lot of calls.
Yeah, and when you do that, when you factor in like how many minutes and hours and days and all that into a year, it was like 4 or 5 calls a minute or something like that. I remember I did the math and I was like, wow, that's crazy. That's crazy.
Yeah, we're busy. We are a busy agency.
And I'd say based on my call count, I'd say between 1/3 and 1/4 of those are mobile hangups. And we have to still take the time away from other calls coming in that could be emergencies. We've got to call back these people that misdialed.
So yeah, explain exactly what a mobile hang-up is.
They could be on a ride, or maybe they were sitting on their phone and it dials 911.
Yeah. Some people roll over in the middle of the night to turn their alarm off, and they call us instead.
And then we got to take the time now and call them back.
Yeah.
I imagine you've heard some things.
Yeah.
We won't get into all. This is a G-rated podcast, but I can imagine that some people accidentally call 911 and they might be doing some things that they don't want other people listening
to.
But as you said, you have to call them back because you don't know. And this goes back into something I mentioned at the beginning of this podcast of a video we did with the sheriff's office where a woman did call 911. You could hear her on the other line, but she wasn't talking to the call taker. Yeah. The call taker had to listen what was happening. So if she would have hung up right away, she might have missed something that was really, really important.
Correct.
But like you said, you have to still go back and check just to make sure.
Correct.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. So you get a lot of emergency calls, I assume, but you might get some non-emergency ones. Do you take those here as well at the call center?
Yes, we do.
Yes, we do.
So how does that work? So somebody calls 911. or the non-emergency number, and then does that get sort of shifted off to somebody else saying, okay, it's not an emergency, but it's still important, but maybe not an emergency? Like what happens then?
If it's not an emergency and the phones are ringing off the hook, we'll let them know. We got to put them on hold, answer 911 calls, and handle the 911 call. Then we go back and help them.
Okay, all right. So, and I think Nikayla mentioned this. Like we don't just hang up on people.
No.
We make sure they're all answered as best we can with the staffing that we have.
Yeah.
But we do make sure we get to all the calls that come in.
And then sometimes we do get emergency calls on the non-emergency line. So we basically pre-screen calls, ask like a general, like what's going on, what's the address, so we can fully rule out that it is truly a non-emergency, that it can afford to wait a couple of minutes.
Okay. So Nancy, I'm going to go back a little bit. How did you end up here at the Orange County Sheriff's Office?
I followed my husband here.
Okay.
He started in 2002, then I started in 2007.
Okay. All right. So did you have a career before you started
I
here?
worked in the mortgage servicing industry.
Wait, in the...
Mortgage servicing
Okay. I thought you said the morgue service industry.
No, the
All right.
mortgage servicing
All right.
industry.
So this was it a totally different sort of career path for you?
Oh, yes. Very different.
So talk about maybe your training. How did you become what you are today?
Well, when I started, we went to Valencia for 2 weeks. Then our class up here was 2 weeks. And then you have 3 phases, a month in each phase. And if you need an extra month, you have what they call an extension.
Okay.
But I think now the classroom is longer.
So now we do 6 weeks of classroom instruction where you learn the basics of call taking, and it's in a classroom, it's not on the floor. You learn how to use our computer system, you learn basic lines of questioning, you learn our call types, our signals, our 10 codes, and then we put you out onto what we call the floor, or it's more like a call center, if we could describe it that way.
Yeah. It's a little dark out there,
Yeah.
too. Keep the lights dim.
And then we do 3 months of on-the-job training. You are with, we call them CTOs, which is the communications training officer, and you're attached to that person, and they assist you as you process calls.
So do you have to get some sort of certification to be okay?
Yeah, we are certified by the state of Florida.
Okay. All right.
So
So
we
so you go through this class, and then you can eventually become a should I say call taker?
Yes,
is that
that's
a demean?
appropriate.
Okay,
That's appropriate.
I know there's the official term, but I can say call taker.
Yeah.
So if you're a call taker, do you have to like pass a test at the end of it?
Well, in the middle of, I would say, your second or your third month of on-the-job training, you will take the state of Florida test to be certified as a communication specialist.
Okay, so like maybe even those first few weeks or the whole 6 weeks, like are you learning like how? Like, what are you learning? How to take calls, what to say, but also the codes and everything?
Mm-hmm. We give you a big binder. And it's broken down into week and days and daily. We do building block training. So we start out with the fundamentals. So this is our 10 codes. You learn our 10 codes. This is our signals. You learn our signals.
Explain what those are.
So 10 codes. So like 10-1, 10-2,
Yeah, what does all that mean?
So 10-1,
you don't have to go through every one because there's probably
I've never heard of 10-1.
But you learn how we talk. So we use like 10-12, which is we're present with someone. It's just basically how we shorten a paragraph. We can use these 10 codes to just simplify something to mean the same thing.
Okay. All right.
And then signals, they correspond with our call types. So if someone is in an argument with someone, we consider that a verbal. So that would be a signal 22, which is some type of a disturbance.
And that way the responding deputy knows exactly what you're talking about. It's not, well, they're kind of fighting, they're a little bit, they're just, when you say the signal, they know, all right. It's
like signal 4 is a crash, signal 3 is a hit and run.
Yeah.
Okay. All right.
So it's just so that we all are aware of what's going on, because in this business, it's life and death. And so we can't be muddled with paragraphs of information. We have to get straight to the point.
Yeah. And so, Nikayla, how did you end up here at the Communications Center?
When I was in college, I worked for my public safety department doing something similar to this, but it was really, really small scale.
Where did you go to school?
Southern Adventist University in Collegedale, Tennessee.
Okay, all right.
And but I've lived in Florida. I lived in this area, and my dad is actually a deputy here for Orange County. And he started 2 years before I graduated. and I was in the valley of decision on what I was going to do. And he was like, well, Orange County is hiring. You did dispatching before. Just come here and dispatch. And so I've been here and I love it.
So when you started, Nikayla, did you have to be a call taker first and then you sort of move over to dispatch? Or?
Yes. So everyone learns how to be a call taker first. That's the entry level. And then once you do your time as a 911 operator, you get to be second tiered in another discipline. And so that's either dispatch or teletype. And so I was slated for dispatch and I love dispatch.
So Nancy, do you do dispatch at all?
No, I do not. I was grandfathered in.
Okay.
But I'm a trainer and I love training.
Okay. You train the call takers.
Right. So
Okay.
since I've been training 13 years, I've had over 100 trainees.
Oh, wow. So you get like the fresh people that come in.
I get all phases. They
She's
know.
awesome.
They know. Give me the trainees. I really enjoy it.
So what's the most challenging thing when you're training a new call taker?
It depends on the person.
Mm-hmm.
There's some people that just take right to it. There's some people it takes longer to get to for them to get to it and feel comfortable taking the shooting calls and not panicking.
Is that usually sort of the hurdle, is getting people that can be calm when things are crazy?
It can be, yes.
Mm-hmm.
What do you think makes a good call taker?
Patience, asking the right questions, empathy.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I would agree with that and say that, like, I don't know.
And being dependable.
I'm trying to think of the word.
Being
Yes,
dependable,
yes.
coming to work.
Yes, being dependable, because we're reliant. We're reliant on people coming to work on time and being here, because our community relies on us, and we need everybody to be here to be able to assist.
Yeah, you guys don't shut down at 10
Never.
o'clock.
No, we don't.
We don't shut down during hurricanes.
No, we don't shut down during the Christmas season.
Yeah, it's a 24/7 operation all the time here at the Comm Center, and I'm sure people realize that because you can call 911 anytime, but that means like bodies have to be in here. They can't. This isn't an at-home job.
Yeah.
You have to sort of be here to work, and so I know this has been a thing across the country when it comes to staffing at in law enforcement, but also in communications centers that it's hard to find people because I mean. I know it seems like you two love it, but I'm sure some people would be like, I could never do that job. And I've heard people say, I'm glad they do it, but it seems like a really hard job. I would never want to have to take those calls, but I'm sure you feel like, well, this is what I want to do or what I like to do because I feel like I'm helping somebody.
Yeah.
I used to think that too. When my husband first started, I'm like, I don't know why you're doing this. Yeah. But then here I am doing it 15 years later.
Yeah. And I tell people on every job, there are pros and cons. There's things that you deal with and you have to process through that. And it's the same thing here. I just have to take myself out of the situation and remember that this could be someone's worst day. And it's their worst day in whatever it could be. But it's my job to make sure that I get the information and I just transcribe it accurately so that someone can go there and give them some assistance.
So over time, Nikayla, I want to ask you, and you as well, Nancy, but over time, do you get to sort of know the deputies that you're talking to? Because I assume you don't see them all that often. I'm sure there's people that you've never probably met in person, but I'm sure over time you get to sort of know the people that you're talking to as you're sending them to things.
Yeah, you get to become familiar with people's voices. I mean, even in the call taking side, we speak to the same people sometimes every day.
Oh, you mean it's for the callers?
Yes.
Yeah. So the call takers don't talk to the deputies.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. But you probably talk to some people every day that,
I do.
Miss Smith, it's not an emergency today, but I'm glad you're calling. Well, how do you handle that, though? Like, how do you sort of deal with people that maybe call 911, but you have to tell them, like, this is not the number to call if it's not an emergency?
I tell them that. And I give them the non-emergency number.
So another aspect of 911 call taking, and maybe dispatch as well, but probably more the 911 side of it, is here in Orange County, as I said earlier, we do have a lot of tourists that probably come here and they don't know where they're at physically. They know they're in Orange County or Orlando, but they might not know exactly what address they're at. But I'm sure we also get a lot of people that both live here and visit here that may not speak English as their first language. So what happens then? Let's say I call 911 and I don't speak English, or maybe I don't even speak Spanish, which I know a lot of people here in Orange County do as well. Like how does that work here at the call center?
We have voyance, interpretation services. So whatever language the most prevalent is Spanish and Creole, But a few years ago, I had one, and I can't remember what the name of the language was, but they were from Rwanda. And I was actually able to, and I still couldn't figure out what language they spoke, but the interpreter knew enough to get me someone that spoke that.
Yeah. And we've had Arabic that comes through sometimes.
Chinese.
Yeah. Chinese Mandarin, Portuguese, Brazilian Portuguese. Yeah. We rely heavily on that voyance interpretation.
And when you say voice, it's not like somebody is in the building listening to the calls. They're somewhere else, right? Okay.
And then we like conference them into the call, if that's a way, like a third line, like a third party line in, kind of.
So the person on the other end may say something, the interpreter listens, and then maybe says it back to you, Nancy, in English,
Yes.
and then you guys. So it's like a triangle. Almost.
Right. I asked them, the interpreter the question, the interpreter asked the caller the question, and then the caller answers the interpreter, and the interpreter tells me what they said.
So another part of this, and I have talked to some other 911 call takers about this. I did a series last year on the Pulse nightclub shooting, and some of the people that were here that night, and I asked them, one thing that sort of strikes me as interesting is, when calls come in, you hear the tragedy that's maybe going on that call, but then maybe you hang up and because you got to take the next call and the deputies are there and they're handling it. But you still, I'm sure you still think about what's happening. Like how do you sort of deal with all the trauma that people sort of bring to you on a daily basis?
I try not. Well, when I'm at work, I stay focused on what I'm doing, and then when I leave here, I may affect my sleep. I don't know, but I just go home.
How about you, Nikayla?
So I've been more of a person that I try to guard myself with it. And so I've learned to like have the emotion, like, cause you can't start the sympathy that comes through. So I process it. Sometimes we try to look up and see how a call resolves itself. Sometimes we don't get that answer. And so I kind of just hope and pray that I did the best. But in that, I've learned to do self-care. Okay. So I make sure that I do the things that make me feel whole just to take care of myself in that.
Do you have hobbies outside of working?
I mean, I love to go to the movies.
All right.
I love to read. I spend time with my family and my friends. So I find outlets for those things.
What about after the call's been done and maybe a few months go by? Do you have to go to court sometimes?
Yes.
Tell me about that. Like, do you have to remember? I mean, I'm sure you have to remember the call or go back and listen to the call. And why would you get called into court at all?
I haven't actually had to go.
Oh.
I haven't figured out why call takers are called. I've heard that they think everybody's a deputy that's on the call. And when they find out you're not a call taker, okay.
Oh, okay.
I mean, that's been my experience because I don't recognize voices. So I'm not sure why they would call a call taker.
Have you ever been to court?
I have been to court for one call.
Okay.
And it was this woman who called because a woman came onto her driveway or her porch, actually. And I guess the guy who was who hit her came back. And so he was physical with her on the porch. So I did have to go to court and listen to that call. But I guess it's mostly because we are like our name record is on the call and what we've updated into the call. So I guess what happens is the state attorneys and the lawyers, they don't know our distinctions on there. So they just call everyone that's on the call and ask what your role is.
Okay. So it's rare, but it can happen.
But it can happen.
Okay. All right. Yeah. Nikayla, what do you like about this? What you said you've been here a while. What do you like about doing this?
Well, I like Nancy. I love training. I think that's my little niche. And so it's amazing to come in here and to train someone to be little images, like miniature me's. And I am a service person. Like this is it. It's a good service job. You're serving the community. You're helping someone, even though they may not tell you thank you. It is a thankless job sometimes, and you have to deal with that. But at the end of the day, I get that self-gratification that I am helping someone.
How about you, Nancy? What do you like about this?
I love the training. It's really satisfying to see some of the people I've trained. Now they're in dispatch or they're supervisors now or ASLs.
Mm-hmm. What is that? What's an ASL?
Assistant squad leader.
Okay, somebody who's up there in management. Mm-hmm. All right. And you just touched on this, Nikayla. That's really interesting. You probably don't get thanked very often because I'm sure the person who called 911, they just might have no idea because maybe the deputy got there and they said, well, thank you, deputy, for doing whatever. But, it was you two that got the deputy there.
Yeah. And some callers do take the time out to say thank you to us. And it's like a shock, like, oh, you remembered me. Thank you. But the deputies say thank you to us too. And it's the same thing. But yes, it is a thankless job sometimes.
Do they ever come back later, like, a month or two later and say, what, I was having a bad day that day and I called, or is that rare too?
Sometimes they do. Sometimes you'll get like a supervisor who will tell you, hey, that person you talked to the other night called back and said thank you. But it is kind of rare. It is.
So let's look ahead a little bit.
Okay.
What's sort of the future of 911 call taking? Because, right now we have our cell phones and people call, and you mentioned the pinging off towers. Is there sort of new technology that you know of or that you've heard of that sort of can help you do your job better?
I'm trying to think. So we have text to 911 now. So people can text into 911 if they're in a situation where they're not able to physically talk. They can text us.
And that comes right to a call taker, and then you can text right back and say, is there like an automated message that comes up first and then, okay.
Yeah, there's like a message that will come up, and we have like message keys that we can type in and say, like, if you're not in a safe space, like continue to message us. But if you are able to call us and we will continue the conversation via voice. But it's a good resource for situations where someone may not be able to talk to us.
And there's a lot of situations like that, I'm sure, where somebody, if they make a phone call, you're obviously maybe calling the police or the deputies, but if you're texting, it might be a little bit less obvious. Or if you're, trapped somewhere that you feel like you have to text.
Yep.
So it's the same thing. You just text right to 911 and it goes right to you.
Yep. And then we have a rapid SOS type of program, which it is a little bit of a step up from the phone tower situation, where that is just a basic guess of where you are based off of 3 cell phone towers. And with rapid SOS, that use more of your phone signal and your GPS within your phone. And that's a little bit more accurate with figuring out where people are, where they currently are. But 911 is evolving, and we have all of these companies that are coming out with information. We have companies that are partnering with alarm companies to get help, medical alert companies, your car, like OnStar and stuff. They partner with those companies to make it easier to figure out where people are.
All right. So this is my last question. I'm gonna give you each time to make your pitch here. So I alluded to this earlier that, both in law enforcement and call takers and 911 centers all across the country, always looking for people, always looking for good people to hire. We're hiring all the time. OCSO.com/careers. If you're interested, you can go there. Why should somebody be a 911 call taker?
To help the community.
Okay. You say to help the community.
Help the community. You're doing something good.
Okay. How about you, Nikayla?
If you have a willing for service and you're willing to learn, we provide you all the resources. We just need the willing bodies who are willing to do it. So come, we'll teach you everything. You might see my face.
Is it a scary job? Because I think some people do think, oh my gosh, it's going to be so scary that people are going to call and yell at me. And
but if you work in customer service, the chance is very high. At least here, you don't have to see the person. You're on the phone with them.
Nobody's going to throw a Slurpee at you.
Exactly.
Hopefully.
Exactly.
All right. Well, Nancy, Nikayla, I really appreciate you. And I know this week or this month is Telecommunicators Week.
Yes,
Next week. And so thank your local telecommunicator. I don't know how you would do that, but maybe tweet something out or leave a comment or something. But thank you for all you do. I know we call you the first responders, and that's absolutely true. So thank you so much, and thanks for being on Behind the Star.
Thank you for having us.
Thanks for listening. Don't forget to subscribe to Behind the Star. You can find us wherever you get your favorite podcasts. Also, follow us on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, and YouTube. Until next time, I'm Jon Busdeker, and this is Behind the Star.